All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely fascinating study from the world of applied linguistics. And honestly, we're going to completely shatter a really common myth about learning a new language. You know, most of us just assume that becoming fluent in a second language means, well, memorizing a giant dictionary of vocabulary and nailing down all those really complicated grammar rules. But what if I told you that true language mastery isn't just about what you know, but about who you are actually willing to become? It turns out learning a language is this deep, sometimes incredibly messy, renegotiation of our very identity.
It really poses the ultimate question, doesn't it? When we speak a new language, are we just translating words in our head, or are we literally reconstructing our identity from the ground up? Think about it for a second. Do you feel slightly different when you speak a different language? Do you kind of adopt a new persona? Our explainer today draws on this brilliant piece of research from the TESOL EJ Journal by researchers Mirzay and Parhezkar, and it tackles this exact mystery head-on. We're going to look at how our internal sense of self actually dictates the very words that come out of our mouths.
Okay, so to really grasp this, we have to tackle a somewhat heavy academic term, pragmatics. But honestly, the concept is incredibly simple once you break it down. Pragmatics is really just the unwritten rules of the social game. It's knowing how to be polite, how to ask for a massive favor without being offensive, and how to navigate a conversation so you don't accidentally insult the person you're talking to. In academia, they break this down into pragmatic linguistics, which are the actual linguistic tools like directness, and sociopragmatics, which are the cultural norms of a given community. But basically, it's just knowing how to do things with words appropriately. Now we need to pair pragmatics with this other concept, poststructuralist identity. I know, it's a mouthful. Traditionally, people thought of identity as this fixed box you were just born into. You are who you are, end of story. But the post-structuralist view argues that identity is actually this incredibly fluid, shifting sense of self. It's like a dynamic puzzle that is constantly being renegotiated through our social interactions over time. It actually changes depending on who we are talking to and what our goals are in that exact moment. You aren't just one static person, you are an active agent, constantly choosing how you portray yourself to the world.
Part 1. Meet Parsa and Negin.
Let's see how all this theory plays out in real life with two 18-year-old freshman students at an Iranian university. They are both majoring in English translation. First up, we have Parsa. He is a super eager, highly confident student. He absolutely loves English, feels he has a natural talent for it, and actively wants to adopt a second language, or L2 identity. He just wants to fit right into the English-speaking world. Then we have Negin. And Negin is totally different. She is initially super resistant to English. She feels deeply rooted in her native Persian or L1 identity. She even admits she had lost interest in English before university and finds it really hard to identify with the culture. So you have the eager adopter on one side versus the loyal resistor on the other.
Part 2. The role-play experiment.
To actually test how these internal feelings translate to real-world English skills, the researchers didn't just ask a few questions. They set up a massive, rigorous 16-week data collection process. They tracked these students throughout an entire academic term using identity questionnaires, classroom observations, weekly diaries, simulated role plays, and these in-depth stimulated recall interviews. This incredibly extensive methodology is absolutely crucial because it ensures that we aren't just guessing why they said certain things. We literally have the students' own diaries and interviews to prove exactly what was going on inside their heads.
Now, before we get to the results, let me ask you something. How would you ask a boss for a major favor versus, say, a close friend? You'd probably use totally different words, right? Well, the researchers measured this using 3 specific variables: power, distance, and imposition. Power is the status difference between you and the other person. Distance is how well you actually know them. And imposition is just how big of a favor you are asking. The higher these variables are, the more polite and indirect you usually have to be. The researchers tested Parsa and Negin at 3 very distinct junctures during the semester. Juncture 1, right at the beginning of the term, was high power and high distance. They had to ask a professor for a ride. Juncture 2, in the middle of the term, was low power and low distance, asking a good friend to cover a work shift. And Juncture 3, at the end, was mid-power and mid-distance, asking a classmate to borrow notes or edit an article. 3 completely different social minefields to navigate.
Part 3. The surprising twist. Expectations versus reality.
All right, based on their personalities, you'd probably guess Parsa nailed the English norms, right? Well, prepare yourself for a massive counterintuitive twist. In that first juncture, where Parsa has to ask his professor for a ride, he uses extreme high politeness. Despite his eagerness to sound native, he says, "Hi, professor, sorry to bother you. My bus has just left, so I was just wondering if you can give me a ride." He completely tiptoes around the request.
So why in the world did he do this? In his stimulated recall interview later on, Parsa explained it perfectly. He said, "Because it is considered impolite in our culture, I used a polite structure to seem more polite and reduce the embarrassment." See, even though Parsa fully knew native English speakers would likely be more direct in that situation, he clung tightly to the Iranian concept of taraf, which is this complex system of ritual politeness. His deep-seated native L1 identity completely overrode his desire to sound English. He literally couldn't bring himself to break his native social rules.
And what is truly wild is that this pattern held true for Parsa all semester long. Even at the second juncture, which was a super low-pressure scenario where he just asks a close friend to cover a work shift, he still used formal, indirect English. He asked, "Would you mind fill in for me?" and completely avoided giving a specific reason for why he needed the favor because, as he noted himself, Iranians heavily value their privacy. Parsa rigidly applied his native cultural rules to his new language, and it actually prevented him from fully mastering L2 pragmatics.
Okay, now let's pivot to Negan. Remember, she started out feeling completely disconnected from English. But fast forward to the third juncture, asking a classmate to edit her article, and she is suddenly direct and crystal clear. She simply says, "The professor wants me to deliver my article, and I have completed it. Would you please edit it for me?" Boom. It's direct, it's clear, and it perfectly uses a culturally appropriate, conventionally indirect English phrasing.
So how did Negin pull this off? Well, her diary reveals this brilliant aha moment. As she spent the semester engaging with her enthusiastic classmates, she wrote, "I felt more reoriented towards an L2 identity. So I decided to act more like English speakers, although I believe that I will never forget about my L1-oriented identity." Negin demonstrated this incredible emotional flexibility. She realized, hey, I don't have to completely erase my Persian identity just to temporarily adopt an English social identity.
So the absolute crux of this whole explainer is this massive twist. The student who desperately wanted to sound English, Parsa, ended up pragmatically diverging from English norms simply because he couldn't let go of his native politeness rules. Meanwhile, the student who initially resisted English, Negin, showed the fluid agency required to renegotiate her identity, and she actually adapted to the new language norms. It turns out, a strong initial desire doesn't guarantee adaptation at all, but fluid identity renegotiation absolutely does. Part 4. Why identity drives language. The core takeaways.
So what does all this mean for anyone trying to learn a language, or honestly anyone just trying to communicate across different cultures? It proves that the mechanics of a language are literally just the tip of the iceberg. Here are the 3 massive takeaways you need to remember. First, grammatical competence does not equal pragmatic competence. You can know every single vocabulary word in the book, but if you don't understand the social rules or if you refuse to use them, you just aren't communicating effectively. Second, identity is fluid and renegotiable. You do not lose who you are by adopting the cultural norms of another language. You simply expand your toolkit. And third, language is a fundamentally social, highly complex process. It is this constant active negotiation between who you are on the inside and the community you are interacting with on the outside.
I really want to leave you with a final provocative thought today. Think about the exact way you spoke today. Think about the emails you sent, the way you ordered your coffee this morning, or even how you asked a colleague for a favor. How do your own linguistic choices reflect your inner identity right now? Are you clinging to old rules, or are you fluidly adapting to the situation at hand? Because language isn't just how we speak to the world, it is exactly how we reveal ourselves to it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the words you use.